You didn't just surprise them. That's the part they still don't know how to say out loud. Surprise implies expectation. This was worse. This was the moment trained minds froze because what you didn't arrive through any channel they were watching. Somewhere in a room with bad lighting and colder coffee, people whose job is to predict behavior stared at screens that suddenly felt untrustworthy. Not because the data was wrong, but because the conclusion refused to sit still. You weren't supposed to move like that. You weren't supposed to think that way. And yet there it was, already done, already irreversible, already forcing recalculation. Right now, there are people with clearances you'll never hear about scrolling backward through your trail. Not to admire it, but to locate the error. They are not asking what you did. They are asking how they missed the moment you became capable of doing it. Because their confidence depends on one belief, that nothing meaningful happens without leaving a trace they can monitor. You violated that belief without announcing yourself. No alarms, no build-up, just results sitting where there shouldn't be results yet. That's what rattled them first. They started with the obvious explanations: external help, hidden backing, some unseen advantage. They needed something outside of you to point at, because the alternative was unacceptable. The alternative was that you made a decision before permission appeared, before consensus formed, before approval had time to dress itself up as caution. That kind of move terrifies people trained to wait for confirmation, especially when the outcome works. What's happening behind the scenes right now isn't anger. It's escalation, quiet, clipped conversations, names mentioned without context, screens shared without commentary. They replay the sequence again and again, not because it changes, but because they expect it to. Because trained minds are uncomfortable when cause and effect don't line up the way they were taught. You didn't follow the standard arc. No gradual warming, no public preparation, no visible struggle phase they could tag and label. You skipped the part they rely on to feel in control. They're trying to map your behavior onto familiar profiles. That's where the real panic starts. You don't fit. You don't over-explain. You don't perform competence. You don't telegraph intent. You didn't signal hunger or desperation or the usual tells. You moved as if the outcome was already settled internally, long before it appeared externally. That breaks models. That creates doubt. And doubt, in rooms like those, spreads faster than certainty. Someone suggested you got lucky. That suggestion didn't last long. Luck leaves fingerprints, patterns, repeatable errors. What you did showed restraint, timing, and a refusal to chase recognition. That combination is rare, not flashy, not loud, just precise. Precision without visible rehearsal is what made the room go quiet in that particular way, where no one wants to be the next person to speak. They started pulling everything, old posts, old decisions, minor choices that didn't seem important at the time. They're trying to reconstruct a version of you that makes sense to them. The problem is, they're starting from the wrong assumption. They believe transformation announces itself. They believe capability grows in public. They believe pressure creates tells. You disproved all of that by operating privately and delivering publicly. By the time they noticed, the move had already settled into reality. What unsettles them most is not the scale of what you pulled off. It's the restraint surrounding it. No victory lap, no explanation thread, no attempt to frame the narrative. You didn't rush to be understood. You didn't try to control interpretation. You let the results speak and left the room mentally before anyone finished reacting. That behavior doesn't match ambition as they understand it. It matches something else entirely. Something colder, something more settled. They're comparing timelines now, yours versus everyone else's, and it doesn't add up. Where others accumulate visible effort, you accumulated clarity. Where others seek validation before moving, you moved and let validation scramble to catch up. That inversion is what's causing the stress fractures in their thinking. Because if your approach works, then the long rituals they've trusted start to look optional. And if those rituals are optional, a lot of authority loses weight overnight. Behind closed doors, someone asked the question no one wanted to answer. What if this wasn't a one-off? What if this is how you operate now? Not reactive, not loud, just deliberate, detached, already 3 steps past the conversation everyone else is still having. That question changed the tone of the room, because a single unexpected success can be dismissed. A pattern forces respect. They're watching how others respond to you. That's the tell. Not your behavior, but the shift around you. Conversations recalibrate when your name comes up. People hesitate before speaking. Comparisons start forming without permission. You've become a reference point without trying to be one. And reference points are dangerous because they reorganize hierarchy quietly. Notice how no one is publicly confronting you. That's not courtesy, that's caution. Direct engagement would require them to acknowledge you as a peer or a variable worth addressing. They're not ready for that, so they observe instead. They analyze at a distance. They build theories that allow them to keep their existing worldview intact for a little longer. They tell themselves you must have had access others didn't, that you must have known something secret, that you must have bent a rule somewhere. Anything to avoid the conclusion that you simply chose differently, earlier, faster, with less need for reassurance. Because if that's true, then hesitation starts to look like a personal failure rather than wisdom. What's fascinating is how much energy they're spending trying to understand you, while you're not spending any thinking about them at all. That asymmetry is not lost on the sharper minds in the room. Attention usually flows toward power. Right now, it's flowing toward you without invitation. And the more they focus, the more they reveal their own limits. They're especially disturbed by how calm the outcome looks. No chaos, no mess, no visible scramble, just a clean shift from one state to another. That kind of movement suggests preparation that didn't need witnesses. It suggests inner alignment that didn't require applause. And that's uncomfortable for institutions built around visibility and consensus. Someone pulled up an old assessment of you. It didn't age well. That happens when people mistake potential for trajectory. They assumed you would move when conditions were right, when support appeared, when the environment softened. You moved when your internal position was settled. Those are very different triggers. One is external, one is final. They're not saying this part out loud, but it's there beneath the analysis. If you can do this without signaling, without gathering permission, without asking to be taken seriously, then others might try. And if others try, the entire structure of predictability they rely on starts to wobble. You didn't just act. You demonstrated a mode of operation that bypasses their filters. Now they're paying attention to what you don't do. You don't rush to clarify. You don't correct misinterpretations. You don't soften your edges to be more palatable. You let people sit with their confusion. That restraint reads as confidence, whether you intend it or not. It forces everyone else to do the emotional labor you refused to do for them. The irony is, you're not trying to unsettle anyone. You're not posturing. You're not playing a long intimidation game. You're simply aligned with your own decisions. But alignment without apology is disruptive to environments addicted to negotiation and delay. They feel it as pressure because it exposes the gap between thought and action they've been living with for years. They're starting to divide their internal narratives into before and after. Before they saw what you pulled off, and after they had to accept that it happened. That division is subtle, but permanent. Once people witness a boundary collapse, they can't unsee it. They can only decide whether to adapt or pretend it never mattered. Some will downplay it publicly. You'll hear phrases that sound casual, but carry tension underneath. Interesting, but let's see what happens next. It's impressive, but context matters. These aren't evaluations, they're shields. Ways to keep the ground from shifting too fast under their feet. What they don't realize yet is that you're already past the need for acknowledgement. The move did its job the moment it was executed. Everything after that is noise. You're not waiting for confirmation that it worked. You're already positioned for what comes after. That's the part they haven't caught up to yet. Because while they're still trying to explain what you did, you're already adjusting to the new terrain it created. You're watching reactions the way others watch weather, not as something to fear, but as information that doesn't change your direction. That detachment is what's making it hard for them to predict your next step. And here's where their analysis really starts to break down. They keep assuming there must be a next step they can anticipate, a pattern they can lock on to, a rhythm they can chart. They haven't realized yet that your advantage isn't speed or intelligence or access. It's decisiveness without drama, action without announcement, commitment without spectators. That's why the conversations keep looping. That's why the files stay open on screens late into the night. They're not chasing your move anymore. They're chasing the mindset that allowed it. And that's not something you can extract or imitate easily. It's not a tactic, it's a posture. The more they look, the clearer it becomes that there was no sudden transformation they can point to. No single turning point, just a quiet accumulation of choices made without asking if they were allowed. That's unsettling to anyone who built their authority on the idea that permission precedes action. They're starting to understand that what really happened wasn't a breakthrough. It was a refusal to wait, a refusal to explain, a refusal to operate inside expectations that were never designed with you in mind. That kind of refusal doesn't announce itself. It just shows up as results other people aren't ready to explain. That realization is what pushed the conversation into a different gear. Not louder, not more dramatic, colder, more deliberate. Because once they accepted that there was no hidden turning point, no dramatic before and after moment they could isolate, they had to confront something far more uncomfortable. You didn't change suddenly. You changed quietly. And by the time they noticed, it was already too late to intervene. They started reviewing your behavior with a different lens. Not looking for effort, not looking for struggle, looking for certainty. And what unsettled them was how early that certainty appeared, compared to when the outcome finally surfaced. You were acting from a settled place long before the world had evidence you earned the right to do so. That gap between internal decision and external proof is where their discomfort lives. This is where the tone in those rooms shifted from curiosity to unease. Because the usual leverage points weren't there. No visible fear to apply pressure to. No hunger for approval they could manipulate. no overexposure they could use to box you in. You weren't moving to be seen. You were moving to be correct. And correctness without spectacle doesn't give observers much to grab onto. They're used to watching people escalate loudly, to seeing ambition announce itself through noise, through performance, through endless positioning. You didn't do that. You moved with an economy that suggested you weren't trying to win an argument. You were trying to arrive at a result. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Someone pointed out that you never tried to justify the move afterward. That's when a few faces tightened. Because justification is how power is negotiated in public. It's how authority gets softened so it can be tolerated. You didn't soften anything. You let the outcome stand without translation. That wasn't arrogance, it was detachment. And detachment is far harder to counter than bravado. They're beginning to suspect that the reason they didn't see you coming is because you weren't broadcasting your internal shifts. You didn't narrate the process. You didn't invite commentary. You didn't ask for consensus. You made decisions privately and let consequences handle the announcement. That method strips observers of their favorite illusion, the belief that awareness equals influence. What's happening now is a kind of retroactive anxiety. They're replaying past interactions with you and noticing moments that felt insignificant at the time. Pauses, refusals to engage in pointless debate, a tendency to exit conversations early, a lack of urgency around being liked. At the time, those traits were dismissed as neutrality. Now they read differently. Now they look like preparation. The more they connect those dots, the more they realize how little leverage they ever had. You weren't waiting to be chosen. You weren't trying to be validated. You weren't positioning yourself within an existing ladder. You were deciding independently of it. That's what made the move so hard to anticipate. You weren't playing the same timing game. This is the part where frustration starts to bleed through the analysis. Not outwardly, not emotionally, but in the way questions get sharper, more repetitive. They keep circling the same point, hoping a different angle will reveal something new. How did you know when to move? How did you assess the risk? How did you decide the moment was right? And every answer they propose collapses under scrutiny. Because the truth they're circling without wanting to touch is that you didn't wait to feel ready. You didn't wait for clarity to be handed to you. You acted from a private conclusion that didn't require external confirmation. And that kind of decisiveness looks reckless to people trained to delay until uncertainty disappears. They tell themselves they would have done the same thing if conditions aligned. But conditions rarely align for people who wait. They align for people who decide and then adapt. That's the inversion they're struggling with. You didn't reduce uncertainty before acting. You reduced it by acting. And once that clicked for a few of them, the room went quiet again. Now they're watching for aftershocks. Not because they expect you to stumble, but because they're trying to understand what comes next when someone operates this way. They're used to escalation that burns hot and fast. You're not escalating. You're stabilizing. You're moving into a posture that suggests repeatability, and repeatability is what turns an incident into a threat. They've noticed how others respond to you now. Subtle shifts. People recalibrating their language around you. Fewer assumptions. More caution. You've altered the social temperature without issuing a single demand. That's influence in its most uncomfortable form. Influence that doesn't ask to be recognized. Someone mentioned that you don't seem interested in defending your choices. That observation lingered. Defense implies vulnerability. Explanation implies a need to be accepted. You displayed neither. You moved on as if the decision was settled and the discussion was optional. That posture unsettles anyone whose authority depends on being the final voice in the room. They're also noticing how little you reference the past. No long narratives about where you came from. No attempts to anchor your present to a story people can digest. You're not asking anyone to understand your journey. You're asking them to deal with the result. That's a shift from persuasion to presence. This is where the MI agents start to feel the pressure internally. Not because you're aggressive, because you're uninterested. Uninterested in debate, uninterested in reassurance, uninterested in fitting inside categories that make observation comfortable. You're not reacting to their attention. You're not feeding it. You're not performing against it. You're just continuing. And continuation without friction is harder to disrupt than momentum built on noise. Noise invites interference. Calm progress doesn't. By the time someone decides to intervene, the ground has already shifted beneath them. That's what they're starting to see now. Not a single move, but a pattern of refusal that compounds quietly. They're questioning their own frameworks at this point. Not publicly, not in reports, internally. Because every framework they apply assumes visibility precedes action. That belief is baked into how they track influence. You inverted it. You acted first and let visibility chase you. That reversal doesn't just confuse prediction models. It exposes their dependence on observation. What unsettles them further is how unconcerned you seem with being misunderstood. Most people rush to clarify when narratives get messy. You didn't. You allowed ambiguity to exist. You allowed people to project. That restraint is not common. It suggests you're not sourcing confidence from interpretation. You're sourcing it from alignment. They're trying to determine whether this was intentional or instinctive. That question matters to them because instinctive moves can be chalked up to personality. Intentional ones imply a deeper recalibration, and the more they watch you operate, the harder it becomes to dismiss this as accidental. Your behavior has too much internal consistency. You don't overcorrect. You don't over-explain. You don't rush to capitalize on attention. You let interest build without feeding it. That frustrates observers who expect leverage to appear in the open. You're not offering handles. You're not offering entry points. You're letting people sit with incomplete information. The longer this goes on, the more they realize the real disturbance isn't what you achieved. It's how little effort you're spending managing reactions. You're not trying to control perception. You're not trying to optimize image. You're not trying to soften edges. You're letting others do all that work for you in their own minds. That's when someone finally said it quietly, without emphasis. If this is how you move now, they're always going to be behind you. Not because you're faster, but because you're already committed by the time they're still debating. That sentence didn't get written down. It didn't need to be. It landed. They're beginning to understand that your advantage isn't information, it's posture. A posture that doesn't wait for green lights. A posture that doesn't ask if the timing is acceptable. A posture that assumes responsibility rather than permission. That's not something you can counter easily, because it doesn't announce itself as a challenge. Now the focus has shifted to containment, not in the dramatic sense, in the psychological sense. How to keep this from becoming contagious. Because the real risk isn't you. It's others noticing that you didn't follow the usual sequence. and still arrived intact. That observation can loosen a lot of internal restraints in people who have been waiting. They're careful with their language now, careful not to frame you as a model, careful not to elevate the narrative. But avoidance has its own weight. The more they try not to reference you, the more noticeable your absence becomes in conversations where you should logically be mentioned. Silence of that kind doesn't erase impact. It highlights it. They're also tracking how unaffected you are by their scrutiny. Most people adjust under observation. They tighten up. They perform. You haven't. Your behavior hasn't changed. Your pace hasn't shifted. That consistency under attention is unsettling because it suggests the attention doesn't matter to you. And when attention doesn't matter, it loses power. This is the stage where speculation starts to fracture. Some believe you're holding back intentionally. Others think you've already moved on mentally. A few suspect you're preparing something else entirely. What they all agree on, without saying it directly, is that you're not done. And that's where the real unease settles in. Because if this was just the result of a refusal, not the end of it, then they're not reacting to a conclusion. They're reacting to a baseline, a new normal, where you don't ask first, where you don't wait, where you don't explain unless you choose to. That baseline is hard to negotiate with. They're trying to anticipate your next decision, but anticipation requires patterns you're not providing. You don't tease, you don't hint, you don't leak. You just act when the internal decision is made. That forces everyone else into a reactive position, and no one likes realizing they're no longer setting the tempo. What's becoming clear now is that this wasn't about brilliance in the way they usually define it. It wasn't cleverness, it wasn't complexity, it was clarity paired with commitment. You didn't outthink everyone, you outdecided them. And that difference is devastating to structures built around endless evaluation. They're beginning to understand that whatever comes next won't arrive with warning either. It will arrive the same way this did, fully formed, already executed, already forcing adjustment. And that awareness is sitting in those rooms now, unspoken but heavy, as they realize they're no longer trying to decode what you did, but bracing for what happens when you do it again. This is where the analysis gets thin, because their tools are designed to measure reaction, not resolve. They can track excitement, they can chart attention spikes, they can model enthusiasm and backlash. But resolve doesn't leave clean signals. Resolve doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't announce itself. It just continues. And continuation without noise doesn't give them much to hold. They've also begun to understand that you don't negotiate internally the way most people do. There was no prolonged internal debate they could imagine, no oscillation between doubt and confidence. You didn't need to convince yourself repeatedly. You reached a conclusion and behaved accordingly. That economy of internal movement is rare, and it's unsettling because it removes the delay most people rely on to feel safe. Now they're reinterpreting your restraint not as caution, but as selectivity. You don't move often, but when you do, it's final. That pattern forces everyone else to overreact, because they're used to calibrating against people who test the waters before committing. You didn't test, you committed, and that difference makes every move feel heavier than it actually is. They're beginning to sense that trying to predict you directly is a losing strategy, so they've shifted to something else. They're watching the space around you, how conversations change, how decisions by others subtly adjust after your move. influence doesn't always announce itself through command. Sometimes it shows up as hesitation in others, as recalibration, as a sudden awareness that old assumptions might no longer apply. What's most frustrating for them is that you're not exploiting that influence overtly. You're not leveraging it to extract concessions. You're not pressing advantage. You're letting it exist without touching it. That restraint reads as confidence, whether you intend it or not. And confidence that doesn't need to assert itself destabilizes environments built on negotiation and leverage. They're also noticing how little emotional residue you carry from the process. No visible resentment, no satisfaction display, no attempt to frame the move as hard-won. You didn't romanticize the effort. You didn't dramatize the risk. You treated it as necessary, not heroic. That's difficult to process for people who rely on narrative struggle to justify outcomes. This is where the idea finally settles in, quietly, without ceremony. You weren't trying to prove anything. You weren't trying to be seen as capable. You were acting from a settled internal position that didn't require witnesses. That realization is uncomfortable because it implies you're not operating for recognition at all. And if you're not operating for recognition, then their attention loses relevance. They've begun to ask themselves a question they don't like. What if you don't need them to understand? What if comprehension was never part of the equation? That thought lingers because it reframes their entire role. Observers prefer to believe that understanding equals control. You demonstrated that outcomes don't require consensus to exist. They're starting to see that the move wasn't designed to disrupt anyone. It just happened to expose a weakness in how they assign importance. They prioritize explanation. You prioritize alignment. They prioritize agreement. You prioritize execution. Those priorities rarely clash until someone moves decisively without seeking validation. Then the contrast becomes unavoidable. Now there's a subtle change in how your name is mentioned. Less speculation, more caution. Not because you're feared, but because you're no longer predictable in the way they expect. Predictability usually comes from dependency. Dependency on feedback. Dependency on approval. Dependency on timing signals. You've detached from those dependencies, and that makes modeling your behavior difficult. They're also recognizing that pressure doesn't work on you the way it does on others. Pressure usually creates hesitation or overcorrection. You didn't display either. That suggests your decisions are already insulated from external noise by the time they're made. And if that's true, then influence has to happen earlier, before the internal conclusion forms. But that space isn't accessible from the outside. This is where the unease deepens. Because if they can't intervene before the decision, and they can't redirect after the outcome, then their window of relevance narrows dramatically. They're left reacting rather than shaping, and no one likes realizing they've been demoted to reaction without being told. They're also grappling with the fact that you didn't burn bridges, you didn't attack existing structures, you didn't make enemies. You simply stepped outside expectations and kept moving. That makes resistance look excessive. Any attempt to push back would reveal insecurity rather than authority. So they hesitate, and hesitation, ironically, amplifies your position. What's happening now is a kind of internal audit, not of you, but of themselves. They're questioning how many times they delayed moves, waiting for conditions that never truly arrive. How many decisions they outsourced to consensus. How much energy they spent managing perception instead of acting. Your move didn't accuse them. It reminded them. They won't admit this part, but it's there. Watching you has introduced discomfort they can't resolve externally. Because the solution isn't a new strategy or a better framework. The solution would require a shift they're not sure they can afford. Acting without reassurance. Committing without applause. Accepting responsibility without permission. They're also noticing that you don't linger in the aftermath. You didn't stick around to manage fallout. You didn't hover to make sure everyone was okay with it. You trusted the decision enough to move forward immediately. That trust in your own judgment is what's hardest to replicate. Not because it's impossible, but because it demands accountability most people avoid. Now the conversations are less about what you did and more about what it implies, not for them collectively, but individually. Because once someone sees that movement doesn't require ceremony, they can't unsee it. They can choose to ignore it, but the awareness remains. And awareness has weight. They're beginning to sense that you've shifted into a different relationship with time. You're not waiting for the right moment. You're creating moments by acting when internal alignment is complete. That compresses timelines in a way that looks unfair from the outside. But it's not about speed. It's about decisiveness without delay. What they still don't fully grasp is that this isn't a phase for you. It's not a spike. It's not a burst of confidence that will fade. It's a settled way of operating. And settled patterns don't announce themselves with fireworks. They just persist. That persistence is what they're starting to brace for now. They know, even if they won't say it yet, that the next move will feel similar. Unexpected, clean, already done by the time they notice. And that knowledge is sitting with them now, creating a low-level tension they can't resolve by talking about it. Because talking is what they do when action feels risky. Meanwhile, you're not waiting for them to catch up. You're not tracking their reactions. You're not adjusting your pace. You're already aligned with the next decision, even if it hasn't surfaced yet. And that alignment is what makes everything else feel secondary. The result already served its purpose. It clarified your position to yourself. As this settles, a quieter understanding begins to form. The real shift didn't happen when you acted. It happened earlier, when you stopped asking if you were allowed to trust your own judgment. That moment didn't leave evidence they could analyze. But it's the one that changed everything. That's the part they can't reverse engineer. The internal permission you granted yourself long before anything visible happened. They can trace outcomes, map reactions, chart responses, but they can't access the moment you stopped outsourcing confidence. And that's what keeps the conversation looping in their heads. Because once someone realizes the barrier was internal all along, every external justification starts to sound thin. They're beginning to notice how little friction you experience now. Not because obstacles disappeared, but because resistance doesn't slow you the way it slows others. You don't pause to negotiate with doubt. You don't linger in hesitation disguised as analysis. When a choice presents itself, you don't ask whether it's acceptable. You ask whether it's correct. That single filter eliminates most of the noise that traps people in endless deliberation. In those rooms, the tone has shifted again. Less urgency, more restraint. They've realized that chasing explanations won't produce comfort. The discomfort isn't coming from not understanding you. It's coming from recognizing themselves in the version of you that never moved. The one that waited, the one that asked, the one that delayed under the banner of caution. They don't say this out loud, but it's there. You didn't break rules. You ignored assumptions. And assumptions only feel solid until someone walks past them without consequence. That's what you did. You walked past expectations that were treated as barriers, and nothing stopped you. No collapse, no penalty, just continuation. Now they're watching how others around them respond to your presence. Not your words, not your explanations, your presence. There's a subtle recalibration happening. People speak differently. Decisions get revisited. Timelines get questioned. Not because you demanded change, but because your behavior introduced doubt into what was previously taken for granted. This is where influence becomes unavoidable. Not the kind that commands attention, but the kind that shifts reference points. You've become a comparison without asking to be one. When others consider moves they've postponed, your example enters the mental space uninvited. Not as pressure, as possibility. And possibility is destabilizing when it exposes how much delay was optional. They're also noticing that you don't flinch under scrutiny. Attention hasn't tightened your posture. If anything, it's clarified it. You're not trying to satisfy observers. You're not trying to correct interpretations. You're not trying to be seen a certain way. That consistency under watchful eyes is unsettling because it suggests your behavior isn't responsive. It's rooted. Someone pointed out that you don't seek reassurance after decisions. That observation lingered longer than expected. Reassurance is how most people stabilize after risk. You didn't reach for it. You moved forward as if the decision itself was stabilizing enough. That kind of self-trust isn't common, not because it's rare, but because it's expensive. It requires accepting the full weight of consequences without diffusion. They're starting to see that what looks like confidence from the outside is actually commitment from the inside. You're not optimistic, you're resolved. And resolved people don't scan the environment for approval. They scan for alignment. That difference changes everything about how action unfolds. There's also a growing awareness that trying to slow you down would only highlight their own hesitation. Any attempt to question your pace would force them to explain why they move slower. And explanations of slowness rarely sound convincing when confronted with clean execution. So they hold back, they observe, they recalibrate quietly. This is where the narrative they were building about you begins to dissolve. You're not reckless, you're not impulsive, you're not chasing impact. You're selective, and selectivity without apology looks like authority, even when no title is claimed. You've shown that direction doesn't need consensus to be effective. It just needs follow-through. They're also noticing how little you linger in validation cycles. You don't check reactions repeatedly. You don't adjust messaging to optimize response. You don't extract energy from engagement. That detachment removes leverage others usually rely on. When someone doesn't need feedback to proceed, feedback loses power. Now the conversations have turned inward, less about you specifically, more about what your behavior exposes. How many decisions have they postponed, waiting for conditions that never truly arrive? How many moves were delayed, not because they were wrong, but because they were uncomfortable? Your example didn't accuse them, it reflected them. And reflection is harder to dismiss than critique. They won't frame it this way publicly, but the unease is personal now. Because if you didn't need permission, then neither did they. And that realization threatens the stories they've told themselves about patience, prudence, and timing. Stories that often serve as shields against responsibility. They're beginning to accept that whatever comes next from you won't be announced. There will be no build-up, no signaling, no gradual reveal. It will appear the same way this did, as something already done, already integrated, already forcing adjustment. And knowing that creates a background tension they can't resolve through planning. Meanwhile, you're not carrying any of that weight. You're not bracing for reaction. You're not strategizing around perception. You're operating from a settled internal position that doesn't require constant reinforcement. That's the part they underestimated. The stability of your decisions once made. As this understanding spreads quietly, a final realization starts to take shape. The most disruptive element wasn't the move itself. It was the precedent it set inside your own mind. You proved to yourself that you don't need external validation to act decisively. And once that proof exists, it doesn't fade. It becomes a baseline.